Hello and welcome to the Sideline Live podcast. My name is Orla Keeling and I am the host of the podcast, where every week we bring you a brand new episode with guests ranging from Olympic champions to local heroes, coaches, support staff and anybody involved in the world of sport. Each week we will dive into different topics, including current affairs in sport, identity, skill, mindset, coaching, and also shine a light on those flying under the radar. So tune in for brand new episodes, new stories, and new insights you've never heard before. Okay, delighted to be joined by Kevin Egan. Kevin, how does a man from Dublin end up presenting on Apple TV in the US? And I have to say, I'm impressed you've kept the accent.
Yeah, I mean, I hope I don't lose the accent. Now, there's certain times, and I remember very well when I first started doing Premiership reports. I'm showing my age now by saying Premiership. It was the Premier League highlight show on RTE back in the day, and I did my first report, and Ryle Nugent was the head of sport at the time. And he called me into the office and he said, "Where do you think you went wrong here?" And he played it. And I said, "Was it the way I said this?" And he said, No. Was it like, should I not have given as much importance to that?" And he's like, No, not that at all. He said, "Listen to your score back again." And at the end of it, I think it was Birmingham against Middlesbrough, right? Two teams that are not in the Premier League anymore. And I said, Birmingham 3, Middlesbrough 1. And he said, "By saying 3, you're just telling everyone you're a Northside Dub. Like, just be a little bit more neutral with your voice." And maybe I hope I haven't lost the Irishness in me, because I absolutely adore our country and I love any chance to get home, I'm home. I love everything about Ireland, but you do have to adjust in certain ways to saying certain things on air. And I sometimes trip over that a little bit over in America. But yeah, no, I'm loving life. I've been very lucky, Orla, to answer your question, to go from RTE to what I'm doing right now and the journey along the way. It's definitely not a simple answer, because it's, 17 years almost since I left RTE. It was January of 2009 when I moved to Chicago. It was the day Barack Obama was inaugurated, on the 20th of January. So I remember it well. My ma's from there. My wife, whom I met a week after moving over, is from Chicago. Great Chicago roots. And I wouldn't change a single thing about the journey. It's been full of little ups and downs along the way and the usual things that we all face on a day-to-day basis. But I've been very, very lucky, and I love and absolutely adore my job right now.
Amazing. How did you actually get into RTE out of interest?
Out of interest, yeah. I mean, RTE was funny because I applied to RTE directly. I was contacting people there. I remember Stephen Alkin years ago showed me a letter, or said to me, "I remember you sent me a letter," and I was 15 or something in school. I was in Fintan's high school in Sutton in Dublin, and I was sending letters just to see if I could get in the door somehow as a commentator. Like, I hadn't got a clue what I was doing, and what happened was I tore my cruciate playing under 21 championship for Raheny. And the doctor said, "You're going to be out for a year." So I said, I better focus my energy somewhere else, because if I'm not focused on something, I'd rather have something that I'm all in on. And at the time it was Gaelic football. And at the time it was trying to play for the Dubs and trying to be as good as I could possibly be. And at the time I was playing well. And I had 1-3 after 20 minutes in that game against Aaron's Isle, out at Aaron's Isle. Kieran Whelan was our manager actually at the time. And things were going well. And then I received a pass off my buddy Andy, and I jumped about, honestly, a few centimeters off the ground. And I think my body went one way, my knee went the other, and it was gone. So that, long story short, that forced me to think about a career in broadcasting, which I had always had an interest in anyway. So watching Michael Lester, he was the dream, he was the idol. Obviously Des Lynam doing Match of the Day over in BBC, Bill O'Hurley, just legends in our space that we grew up watching. And that was the goal then. All of a sudden I thought, okay, get into RTE, focus your attention on that. And I got lucky. A production company called The Production People had just opened up, and I had applied a couple of times. I'd been to the audience for a political show back in the day. Why am I forgetting the name of it now? John Bowman was the host. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on the name of the show, but I went. And I ended up getting the rundown off a guy called Johnny McGuigan, who's since gone from the RTE, I believe. And he gave me the running order, which had the phone numbers on it. So I ended up calling the same lad twice. And he said, "Look, don't call me again. there's a production company now, go and apply. And I did. And I got a job on the Olympics in
Very
2004 as
good.
a runner, making tea and
How,
coffee.
when in terms of people don't understand, I've been a runner, and Jesus, you're literally running.
Best.
You're actually
The best though, isn't it?
yeah, it
You
is
have access to every door
exactly.
and every person, like, you know?
That's actually some of the most underrated things. If you want to make friends with anyone, if you work in TV, you make friends with the runner, because they're also in charge of the food. They in charge of where you're when you're getting your food. If you're working on a job, what what did you learn from being a runner and observing? Because I think that's another thing. Just being in the space and being a fly on the wall, you really pick up a lot from interacting with people, but also just from observing.
I think the number one thing I realized straight away was how little I knew about TV, and like landing into that world and seeing what was going on. I felt like an imposter. So instantly your survival instincts kick in, right? You're like, I don't know much about TV now. I thought I did from simply being a viewer, at home. And you land in and it was chaotic and it was manic and it was fun, the Olympics. Then the second thing I learned was, look, you've got some level of people skills. So just shut up. Don't be the loudest person in the room. Be an absolute sponge. Do everything that's asked of you on time. If you're not sure, ask questions. And deliver a good cup of tea. And when you deliver a good cup of tea or coffee to, maybe it's Bill O'Hurley or Michael Lester, maybe they'll say to you at some stage, hey, what do you want to do? And have your answer ready. And I remember at the time vividly, like my answer was, I'd love to work on the Sunday game. It wasn't, I want to present the Sunday game or I want to present the Premier League show. It was, I'd love to work on the Sunday game. And so that ended up working in my favor, because I remember a job came up as a researcher. And the first name that popped into Paul Byrne's head, Paul's since moved on from RTE. He's an absolute legend, brilliant guy who ran the GAA department for a long time in RTE TV. And he said, Kevin Egan has mentioned he'd love to work in the Sunday game. He's passionate about it. My dad was a Gaelic footballer, won a couple of All Irelands with Dublin. And it just meant so much to me when he said, we'd love to bring you on as a researcher. And then I was working the World Cup in 2006 as a researcher. And one thing leads to another when you're in the door and you be that sponge and you aren't the loudest person in the room and you're a good human being, hopefully. And people will always want to give you a chance then.
Sorry, I've completely glossed over your dad and the Dublin kind of connection there, but also from a GA point of view. You're a big Raheny man, Brian Fenton, obviously. I think you met him there in Croke Park maybe last year, or the year before. GA was obviously the number one then growing up, I'm assuming.
Yeah, number one by far. I like jumping over the turnstiles with my dad as a young kid, or some of my favorite memories in life. Like the Cluxton's winner against Kerry in 2011 is absolutely number one for me in terms of sports memories. And it's not even close, actually, because my dad, my mom, the five of us siblings, we were all at the game, all sitting in different areas of Croker because there was no chance for getting 7 seats together. But we all met at Gaffney's afterwards. And my dad, I'll never forget him saying, and thankfully he's still alive and well, but he said, I'll die a happy man now. There was just such a weight for Dubs heading into that one. Like from the win in 1995, I'll even never forget that. I was 10 and I was at a swimming tournament over in Leeds. And I remember someone at the airport let me call home to figure out if Dublin won, because none of us had to see, we didn't have mobile phones back then. And so calling home to see if Dublin won in 95, and they did. And then in 2011, it was just next level. That for me, and obviously Dublin fans, we were spoiled after that with the great run. But 2011 was just such a moment that we'll never forget. And my dad, the stories of the two All Irelands and Heffo's army, and he still meets up with those lads regularly. And I always loved the fact that he played for Dublin. That was just the ultimate thing for me to tell people when I was a kid growing up.
You obviously dreamt then of playing for Dublin. Did your career ever split to Dublin teams or anything?
No, I wasn't good enough. Like, I talk about tearing my cruciate. Back then, that was at the point where I was like, are you going to take this seriously enough to, and I didn't. Like, that's the reality. I realize now that even at that early age, like, I needed to have much more of a high performance mindset, like the guys do today, that with watching your diet, getting your sleep, training every single day, even if it's by yourself. I didn't do those things that you need to succeed at the very highest level of Gaelic games. And I wasn't good enough. I tore my ACL, and that was the focus down on TV. And I think that was a real, maybe like a sliding doors moment where I knew then, okay, power into this career and drive on, and hopefully get a few breaks along the
Yeah,
way.
it's funny actually. Jackie Hurley had the exact same moment. She actually broke her neck playing basketball. It was a really like scary moment, obviously, to break your neck, and she recalled, if people that haven't listened, you can go back to that episode recorded with her a couple of months ago, and she she was like, what if I can't play, what am I going to do? And that's actually kind of why I set this up. Actually, I've spoken about this a couple of times where I had a huge injury and I couldn't play sport, and I just lost my whole identity in relationship with sport, and I was like, I want something else to keep me involved in it. And then I set this up, and now thankfully I'm back playing. I don't know if you call it playing the level I'm at, but yeah,
it's playing. It doesn't matter what level
walking.
you're at.
That's what I'm doing. But
Not about your ability, it's about your contribution.
But that's like it's interesting how kind of playing has kind of pushed a lot of people into the career. In terms of going into the career and developing it, like I look at a lot of the differences now. I'm just really interested, like there's been so much evolution. Obviously multimedia and social media has changed a lot of things, but I'm interested now, like you have quite a wide range of experiences and skills. Like is that what you would advise someone listening now to have, or special what's now looking back on how you did your career and what it's like now?
I think the way I progressed through the ranks probably have some basics that people can take along the way. But I also think the game has changed so drastically, as you mentioned, that it's very important for people to produce content now. If you're in any way interested in being a broadcaster, there's no excuse with a camera and an audio device on your mobile phone to be able to just do match reports yourself and practice, practice, practice. Like I ended up having a wild detour in my career where I worked for WWE for 3 years and I had the pleasure of kind of getting to know John Cena a little bit, who's been in the news an awful lot over the last few days, given his retirement from the industry. And like he would speak about standing in front of the mirror all the time. Like as a young kid, he would play video games or he'd be in front of the mirror practicing promos and practicing acting. And it sounds so basic, but these are the things that I think we sometimes struggle with, and especially maybe with the Irish culture of like when you say something like I want to be this and this, people would say, would you go out of that? Stop, who do you think you are? Like, and there's a bit of that I love and there's a bit of that I hate as well. And I think that we should be encouraging people, anyone with ambition, that's saying I would love to one day be, it's like, all right, well, how are you going to do it? What's your first step that you're going to take? Because the first step people should be taking now, if they're interested in broadcasting, is practice. Consume everything. Read the articles, watch the shows. You can watch now with streaming devices. You can watch so many shows back as well. Study the people that you admire, right? So, for example, Ernie Johnson here in the US is one that I look at. He's managing a desk beautifully with the most high profile personalities that you'll witness on TV here in Kenny, Charles, and Shaq. And he does such a masterful job of being the straight guy, right? Keeping the show on the track, but also having fun and knowing where to poke the bear a little bit and lean into that. And I always think that like Michael Lester, for example, with Joe Brawley, Colin O'Rourke, Pat Spillane, had to have the personality and the relationship with them for them to thrive. Because people can focus in on the host and what the host is doing or whatever else, but it's when the analysts are shining. For me, that's always a wonderful reflection on the host.
How do you do that? How do you manage? Because I don't think people realize, and I still don't have a full understanding of being a presenter, having someone in the ear, having the clock, having the the auto cue going. The match is either coming on or being delayed. Prime example, I was working at the Munster final last year and it was all delayed and there was a scramble to get stuff done and it had to be done. Like, how do you balance the live sport but also helping other people shine?
I think one, it's knowing your subject. So if you're a master at that subject, right, and you consume everything, any type of delay does not matter. If you know these two teams or if you know this tournament, whatever you're covering inside out, you'll absolutely thrive in those moments. Those are the moments that actually you'll shine and your bosses will be like, oh my God, this guy, this girl can like cover any amount of time on this subject because they're a master at it. Number two is, I think away from the on-camera part, a great host will get to know their analysts and really understand them as a person. So the people that I work with week in, week out, I think I probably know some of their deepest struggles in life right now. I probably know what makes them happiest. I know, for the most part, their partners in life, and I know their kids. And I'll always ask about the kids. I'll always ask about life. We'll go for coffees. We'll grab a beer after the show. We'll do whatever it takes. Two of them came and stayed at my mom and dad's house back in January, and I brought them to Croke Park. We met up with Brian Fenton and Bradley Roy Phillips, who played in the Premier League. He's Ian Wright's son. He played with Man City, Southampton, a few different teams. And Sasha Kleshin, a guy who played in the Champions League, played over in Anderlecht for years and played for the US over 50 times. They came and stayed at the house. And to connect on a much deeper level with them away from work is some of the greatest prep you'll ever do. Because then when you're on air, you've built trust, you've built a real relationship, you know what makes them tick. So that in big moments, right, when something happens in a game, I'm thinking, no, I won't go to him on this. I'm going to go to him, and here's why in my head. And you can't just ask fluff questions. You have to be prepared. And the preparation is far beyond just simply the studio and knowing the two teams. It's knowing your analysts, it's knowing your producer, it's knowing the overall picture here of what's involved in putting together a good TV show. And that's where I think a guy like Ernie does such a good job. Rebecca Lowe does the Premier League here on NBC. She's absolutely amazing. And we've both worked with some great hosts back in RTE as well. So I take a little bit from everybody that I've admired along the way.
What do you think is the biggest thing that people don't understand about being a presenter live TV that aren't in the industry?
That there's so much that goes into it beyond simply what you see. For example, I'll never forget my dad years ago saying to me, "You had the graphic wrong." I'm thinking that's not my job, but like genuinely, there's a part of me now that I take responsibility for so much of our show, and if there's mistakes along the way, maybe there's production staff that need to learn a little bit more about the league, and maybe through little chats or getting to know them, and these are, I think, the world class basics that a good host needs to consider. You always go to the control room. You shake everybody's hand. You have to. You have to because you set the tone. And as a host on a big show, you have a chance to be a team captain, right? You have a chance to set the tone, set the example for everybody, be a good leader, be welcoming, but be firm on like the standard set that we're all in this together. That when someone takes a day off, let's say a graphics operator isn't that focused, doesn't really care, isn't that engaged, and there's mistakes, it reflects poorly on everybody. So once you can create and cultivate a really good culture within a building, well, I think that gives everybody a chance to thrive. It gives everyone a chance to really enjoy their job. And with that, I think the product going out on the air is much, much better.
I'm interested in the American versus Irish approach, and from the perspective of, I think I was saying to you before we recorded, I've done a lot of work on, we have a lot of Irish basketball players, particularly females at the moment in the States, and I'm kind of covering them. And through the interviews, actually, it's very interesting. They were talking about the Irish mentality, and we touched on that. And they were saying how it's very different over there. Everyone's confident and ready and portraying that, whereas the Irish thing is naturally, we're so like, kind of, not all the time, but we're very much, oh, I can't say that I want to go to America because then everyone's gonna be like, who do you think you are, and pull you down a step or two, do you know? And I kind of love that, and I kind of hate it at the same time.
Same.
But I'm just interested in, one girl gave me a particular anecdote that will always stick with me. She said, I said, what's your proudest achievement? And she said, coming to America and being on a scholarship. And I'm so proud that I said that, because 6 months ago or a year ago I wouldn't have said it, because I would be in a more of an Irish mentality. What's the difference? Have you seen that?
Yeah, I have. And I think it's such a good point you bring up, Orla. Like when I was at WWE, I thought it was really interesting chatting with Drew McIntyre and Sheamus one time. And they're two huge names. Obviously, Sheamus is from Dublin. And I know I'm really good pals with Becky Lynch. And I think there was something similar with Becky too, where when you're raised a certain way, when you're the loudest in the room, you're usually shut up pretty quickly at home, right? And again, I love that and I hate it because there's an obnoxious element to a lot of the Americans that I worked with there that love the idea of jumping into the middle of the ring and like being the loudest person and talking about how great they are. And so I think it was Seamus years ago or Drew that said to me, like, it's interesting when you study it because from the Scottish and the Irish backgrounds, they came over and they're wrestling, the element of wrestling, they were excellent at that. But it was the performance aspect, the in-ring promos, as they call it, that they had to stand up in front of 20,000 people and talk about how great they are and stuff. And there was a bit of that where they're like, oh, and I had that nearly like an inferiority complex when I was there with WWE as well, because you're in the ring and you're like, oh man, this is like, but you've got to lean into it. And I think once you break through, it's nearly like a cringe mountain. Once you get to a point where you're like, you know what? I can be the best version of myself if I do this job really well. And this is how I'm going to do it. And I don't have as much of that like in the football world, but what I do have, and my dad has even joked at me about it, saying like, if you come back and you worked at RTE now, people would be like, tell your man to calm down because I probably have, with the energy I have to give on like MLS. and Apple TV, especially MLS 360, because it's a live whip around show. So you're going from commentators that are maybe at a 9 out of 10. They could have just seen an absolute world class goal and they're, what I call. And then next thing it cuts to the audio in studio. And I've got to meet that commentator. And if they're at an 8 or a 9, I've got to at least be at a 7 or an 8. So in studio, like if you had a camera on me in studio, you'd see me and I'm punching the air and I'm out of my seat and I'm animated. And then I'm looking at my analysts and I'm telling them to rise up and meet me. You know, if I'm at a 7 or an 8, meet me at a 6 or a 7 at least. So there's more of a natural decline on the energy so we can eventually get back into the chat. It's just very important. Energy for me is crucial. And sometimes I watch shows and I'm left wanting more, you know, when I watch certain shows of the energy that people give, especially when it's sport, especially when it's entertainment. Like people work hard each and every day and they sit down to enjoy a show. And I'm not saying be obnoxious, but be really enthusiastic about the product because at the end of the day, we're selling something, you know, whether it's, you know, watching the GAA or football or horse racing, whatever it is, you're selling the product and it's important you're passionate about it.
Yeah, that's exactly what Brian Goodseiler from Sirix X FM, I know you did a bit of work for them, from he's on the NBA side of things. We were talking about that when I interviewed him there a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about the energy because I was asking for him kind of, you know, the way he approaches it. And how do you, for someone that he was saying it's you're yourself, it's just an enhanced version of yourself, but just for someone listening, like I probably need to work on my energy. Sometimes I'm very monotone and very kind of dry. What I need to get
Well,
up
it
to the
depends what
you know.
platform. You're having chats. We're having chats now. So it'd be crazy if you were like, welcome in. And no, you can't do that in this medium. So it just depends on what your role is.
Yeah. Yeah, like for example, let's say commentary, that's kind of once or twice that's kind of been the feedback to me, kind of my levels in terms of raising it. Like what advice would you give on that energy then?
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, commentary you have to like if you listen to Marty on an All Ireland hurling final Sunday is not. He's not leaving anything on the table. Like he's giving you everything he's got in terms of pure passion, pure energy, and that's reflected in the response from the audience. The audience love that. They want to know that you on commentary feel as passionate about the game as they feel in the pub or at the game, watching it live, wherever you're watching from. And so watching Marty and seeing the videos of him and John Milan up in the commentary booth, like up in Croker, doing the same thing that I'd be doing or you'd be doing watching at home, like that's really, really important. And people resonate with passion. They understand when you feel strongly about something. If I'm on commentary and if on MLS 360, for example, I'm welcoming back and saying, a really good goal there now from from Evander for Fintan. And no, people at home would be like, the guy just hit it in off the underside of the bar, and you're going to give me that energy. And sometimes there is something about like there's a real English style of football commentary that I'm now maybe I've been conditioned, and I certainly have been conditioned over the last 16 years of working here, that I'm looking at it going, Jesus, give me more in that moment, lean into it, and like be the entertainer. We have an obligation as broadcasters to be entertainers as well. And if you disagree with me on this one, I'm at a loss because you're in the entertainment world. People again finish their day at work, they give you the time, right? So I like to think of hosting a show as like hosting a party in your house, right? When I open the door and people come to my house for a party, I decide, and my wife, of course, what music we've got on, what sort of food we've got later, how clean is our place, what sort of energy am I giving them with the welcome. You set the tone. And it's the exact same with a TV show. You set the tone on the energy level. When people give you their time to tune in, you want to greet them with energy and love and make sure that they feel that you're really into this job, you're passionate about it, and that it's going to be a good show and you're going to keep the thing on track.
Next time you hear me on commentary, I'll be like, oh my God, you know, I'll just go OTT on it and just do it. I'll be like, if you're wondering why the change
But
is
it's got to
Kevin.
fit the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's got to it's so different. Like if somebody and also you have to like Orla leave space to go to another level. So for example, you can't in let's say if it's an All Ireland quarter final, right? You can't go to 10 out of 10 on a moment there because it's unlikely that you can because there's going to be another moment that you need to go to another level for. For example, Messi, Argentina, World Cup against Mbappe in France. Like there were moments in that game where that's a World Cup final. That's one where you leave it all out there because there is no greater prize than the World Cup for these guys. And it's the same maybe in an All Ireland final, right? Like there's moments that you have to give it everything you've got and you've got to meet the moment. And sometimes people go too far on moments that don't warrant that energy, you know? So it's about feel, it's about understanding and your knowledge of the game and your knowledge of sport and entertainment are very, very important in those moments.
Not a question I was going to ask probably later on in the chat. How much of your role is actually not only, first of all, you've touched on it very well, obviously knowing the sport, knowing the analysts, but actually reading the moment? And you could say reading the room, but it's probably more reading the actual show and the moment of the game. Like, how much is it more you're reading the moment and you have all the prep done? I'm just trying to,
Yeah.
how do you balance the moment and what you give in it?
For what I do now, like I'm lucky in that I'm covering one league weekly or every few days really. I'm up and back to New York to our studios from where I live in Atlanta, and I feel like I'm an expert on the league I'm covering now. I feel like I understand the storylines. I could tell you right now about all 30 teams and the inner workings and how what makes them a contender for next year or what makes them a contender for the wooden spoon. Like I've got a good read on it. And that's when you rely on your knowledge for that feel, for that sensation, for the understanding of the moment of, well, here's what's at stake for this individual or for this fan base or for this club. And I always go back to that. And again, not to bring up the WWE days, but that's something John Cena and I had spoken about for a long time, was just what are the stakes at play here? And sometimes there was a WWE match that didn't have much at stake and you'd be nearly making up storylines. But in football, there's always something. There's always something. Like look at what's at stake for Ireland now in March when we go to Prague to take on Czechia or potentially the game at home against Denmark. But then look at friendly games. Like I'm looking at the US now gearing up for the World Cup and they're playing friendly games. There's so much at stake. And when you really, as a storyteller, lean into the personal stakes, the collective stakes, I always write out on my prep what's the story of the match, right? What is the big story of the match? If you had one headline right now for your prep, what is it? And I think that prep is really important. It's something I've taken from the sports entertainment world and brought it to sports because that's what's going to hook your audience. You always have to hook an audience. Like leave them wanting more. When you go to a commercial break as a host, you're not doing your job well if you just say, we're going to step away now, we'll be right back. It's generic, it's boring, it doesn't leave me wanting more. Whereas if you can tell me something that's at stake for someone or a team and you sell it in a way, or if it's a really good statistic, that's a moment that a good host can shine in, is the segues, is the hooks, because there's so much emotion attached to sport and it's up to us to find that emotion and really sell it.
How, like in terms of what you're sharing there, where did you learn all of that? You touched on WWE. I probably kind of glanced over what you've done in terms of the steps from RTE to even where you are now. Can you take us through moving to the States and building to where you are now on Apple TV?
Yeah, so moved to the States in 2009, worked 6 months in an Irish bar before I eventually broke through to a network called the Big Ten Network. It's a Fox Sports College station. There were some challenges there, like I've spoke about it in the past, where there was a fella who just wouldn't put my accent on the air. He just wanted American voices and all that, and that's fine. I've had enough breaks go my way, maybe with the accent. So I eventually set up my own free online football show. It was called the Big BTN Soccer Report, and that led to my studio boss was as sound as you can imagine, and he said, "Just don't get in the way." They all called me Dubs. Dubs, just don't get in the way. So I went and set that up. That led to an audition for the Chicago Fire in MLS as the sideline reporter, which led to a commentary role, which led to different things in Chicago before moving to Miami and beIN Sports, where I was covering La Liga, Serie A, Liga. Like we had a lot of the international leagues and World Cup qualifiers as well for the US and throughout South America. The South American World Cup qualifiers instantly became my favorite thing to watch when we talk about the global game. But I got to go to Barcelona and Madrid several times. I was on the sideline hosting El Clasico for North America, which was just a dream when you have Messi and Ronaldo on either side and MSN against the BBC. A special time to witness that. And then I moved to Atlanta. I was working with CNN International, covering again global football. And I got a random phone call one day from WWE, basically asking me to go audition for a role there. And I had never been a fan. Like I'd never watched WWE growing up as a kid, like all my friends in school had. But I said I'd go and at least experience it and see what it's like. And it left me wanting more because it was such a big production. It was blockbuster. Everything about it felt massive. And I knew it would make me a better storyteller and broadcaster. And it did. Loads of challenges. It was really hard, like really, really difficult, especially when I was full time working with Apple and MLS and full time with WWE. I'm doing two full time jobs. I have a newborn baby. I've got kids at home, my wife. I'm gone 5 days a week. It was an absolute grind. And it wasn't sustainable long term, especially with the new job I got with Apple and MLS. I got the job as the lead host. So that meant that I needed to be in New York on a Friday night, but at the time I was doing Friday Night SmackDown. It all came to a head. But it was great. It was 3 years there that I'll take with me forever, from a storytelling perspective, from a grandiose feel and understanding how to put out fires maybe in the moment. There's a lot of things that changes on the fly. You're constantly pivoting, avoiding landmines on air. But it became fun. It became like a video game you're nearly playing in the moment. So I loved it.
How do you build credibility in a sport that you didn't grow up watching, and we don't like WWE? It is popular here, but like, and as you say, probably the accent comes into it as well. Like it's who's this?
No, the accent
You
was
know,
the worst thing
yeah,
for
like who's
credibility.
this Irish lad talking about
Yeah.
WWE? Does he even
Yeah.
know what it is? Like,
Yeah, no. And like the fans there, some of them liked me, some of them hated me. And it's one of those things you just have to, don't read into the love, don't read into the hate too much, just try and keep going. And no matter what you do, when you portray yourself out there on camera, no matter what sport you're in, there is going to be people that have nothing better to do than attack you on every single level. And it's like, some days it will get you down. Some days, honestly, early on, when I was doing that job, I was like, oh, wow, I can't believe the amount of people that hate me. But then you're thinking, like, the worst of us give off abuse on social media. So am I really going to be affected by the worst people there are out there, or the people that just have nothing else to do? So I tried not to let it bother me too much, tried to just keep moving forward. And I think it just made me much stronger as a person, like thicker skin, understanding my value in other areas, understanding my value to my family and wanting to be home more. It just offered so much perspective, and I'm so grateful, honestly, for the 3 years spent there.
a question I love asking, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts. You mentioned John Cena. You've a number of former professional athletes on your current program and in other spaces that you've worked in. What's the biggest misconception that we have of elite athletes that's out there? Can you give an insight into what it's actually like working with them and getting to know them as people?
I think I think it's a great question. And I think when you study these people, you realize just how hard they work. Like, we might see, say, Cena on a red carpet or in a movie, and you think, oh, what a life he lives. Or insert name here from people I work, like Lionel Messi now. I was just in Miami, was hosting the final that he won. Messi doesn't post his workout routines at home like we see maybe Ronaldo doing a lot more of. But he's a physical specimen that's going to be 39 in June, 39 at the World Cup. And he's still doing it. And he just signed a new 3 year deal. He's going to play probably until he's 42. We don't see that ever, but he's the greatest of all time for a reason. It's because he's able to manage the noise, manage the outside world, doesn't succumb to the pressures of it all. He seems to have the right team around him, and that's the case. Was the case with WWE and with football. Is make sure that you surround yourself with the right people. I think the biggest thing though is consistency. The biggest thing is consistency. Like, the very top players, the very top WWE stars, they didn't have like f ups on air. They weren't in the ring forgetting their lines. They weren't, like messing up matches in the moment. Like, they're the ones that just knew how to deliver when it matters most. And it's the same with Messi. It's the same with some of the top players. And it's the same with some of the top broadcasters, quite honestly. You study the top broadcasters, you understand that they don't panic in big moments. And the only way to get there is reps. The only way to get there is to fail and get back up again. And I've failed so many times, I can't even begin to count. Like, it's ridiculous, all of the amount of times where I've just like, how did I let that happen? Or, why did I go down that road? Or watch something back, and I always watch back a lot of the work, and I'll say like, oh, I missed an opportunity there to ask that question, and that's something I need to learn from. So study your work, study the very best, and be as consistent as humanly possible.
I've actually a number of kind of former athletes or current athletes listen to the podcast, which is always interesting. And for those that want to get into media roles or as analysts or contribute on whatever sport they play or they have an interest in, what advice would you give them on moving into the world of media?
So there's different advice, I think, for a host versus an analyst. For the analyst, my advice would be, as quickly as you can possibly do it, jump off that cliff and become a broadcaster. Stop it with this I'm a player stuff. You're done. Your career is over. And the quicker you realize that now you're gone from being a player to a broadcaster, and the broadcaster element's really important because there's an entertainment factor that I've mentioned guys like that Brawley, O'Rourke and Spillane and these guys that we've become so accustomed to watching, Eamon Dunphy, with Johnny Giles. Like, these guys understood the value of entertainment. Roy Keane now, when he's a broadcaster, understands that he's not a former player anymore. He's not acting like he did as a player. But the amount of people that go from being players to broadcasters and keep that same media trained, monotone energy, they're not delivering where they need to deliver. So be a really good analyst. Focus on what you know well in terms of the football or the golf or whatever it is you're covering. But, you're on the precipice, jump off, become a broadcaster, train yourself to become a broadcaster. The power of the pause is very important. How you deliver things is very important. Like I noticed at a very young age when he became a broadcaster, Gary Neville went from being a player to a broadcaster in a really impressive way. He stopped being, say, for example, as safe as he would have been as a player. He gave strong opinions, but he gave really intelligent opinions, and he delivered them in such an impressive way where he'd say something along the lines of, I think I can understand what the problem is. Pause, pause, pause. And he'd sit up and he'd lean in and he'd deliver something. But the pause meant that all of us at home became meerkats. We're all nearly sitting up in our seat wondering where he's going to go with this. And that sort of delivery, that sort of performance as an analyst is so important to take your game from being a former player and someone who's decent on TV to now being a very good television analyst where you can make a very good career over a long period of time. And I think there's too many TV networks that don't help their analysts, that don't coach them, and just allow mediocrity, quite honestly. And they shouldn't. Everybody should be taught and coached and helped along the way, because it's not something that's natural for former players.
Yeah, I'm a big Gary Neville fan. Since he's stopped playing, he's nearly giving himself another kind of string to his bow in terms of being a broadcaster and all the other stuff he's doing. Do you think you mentioned a lot of names there in terms of the pundits, and a lot of them were maybe former pundits, or maybe, maybe not to say they're on the way out, but, some of them aren't on air anymore. Are we missing that in Ireland in terms of media, or is it not as blockbuster as it could be?
I think so. Yeah. I think when I watch Irish coverage now, I love watching Irish coverage at home. And there's some outlets that I think are doing really good stuff. There's other times I tune in and I'm like, I'm just left a little bit, like I miss the days of the Dunphy performance. And again, I go back to, and I'm not alone, by the way, the amount of people that will remember those days for big time Irish football moments, right? Like when Bill came back on camera after the match against Romania in 1990, those moments are famous, but they also had to deliver in those moments. It wasn't just a given. Like, what if we qualify now in March and we have big moments? It's up to the host and the analysts in that moment to deliver iconic moments on TV as well. And it's not just something that's going to happen, by welcoming in and let's discuss the match or whatever else. They have to understand the moment that everyone's watching, and this is a big moment to have some fun with it. And I always thought Bill O'Hurley, he just did such a masterful job of poking the guys and knowing where their trigger points were. And this goes back again to the preparation of being a host and making sure that you know your analysts inside and out and you understand what grinds their gears. And Bill, that's one of the most underrated aspects to Bill O'Hurley, Lord rest his soul, because I just loved every aspect of the job that he did. He kept it very simple in a lot of ways, but he would always, like, I was his researcher, and he'd always want, say, the odds for things. And like, we had one moment where I gave him the odds, and I'm convinced I had it right, but I had odds to get out of the group in the Champions League, and then I had odds to win the tournament. So I had Celtic at like 33 to 1 to win the Champions League, but I also had Celtic at like 4 to 1 to get out of the group. And he said on camera, he said, "Now, Eamon, Celtic are 33 to 1 to get out of the group." And in that moment, I'm sinking in my chair. And Duffy was like, "I want to know what bookies you're going to, Bill." But like, it was basic. It happened. It wasn't a big deal, but it was entertaining TV, and they knew how to play it extremely well. And also, they pushed the envelope at a time that maybe society wasn't so scared to say something that people might not be offended by. They just went for it, and there's a part of me misses that bit of crack that they had on air.
Yeah. I was at the Second Captain's podcast live show there recently enough in October, and Eamon Dunphy came out and there was a standing ovation when he came on stage and when he left. So I think you're not the only one that misses him and the crew.
Yeah, and there's great people coming through, I'm sure too. But it's up to the networks, whether it's RTE or Virgin or whoever else is bringing through analysts. don't just pick guys that just finished their career and expect that they're going to go from the pitch to a TV studio and deliver. Like, they have to be coached and trained and helped along the way as well, and encouraged in the best possible way.
When you look at your career, what's the hardest step in terms of getting to where you are now?
I think the hardest step, honestly, when I moved to America, was getting in the door somewhere. And I think back to rejection after rejection, and just, it was Jackie Hurley, actually. Jackie Hurley helped me so much, because Jackie used to room with a girl named Lisa Cornwell. Jackie said to me, oh, by the way, when I was over here, she said, there's a girl I used to room with. You should probably, I think she works in Chicago at this college network. Drop her a line. And I did. And Jackie was so cool to do that. And then Lisa, like, she didn't get back to me one time. And I remember I was watching a game that she was commentating on. I said, okay, by the time she goes to the truck, says goodbye, she'll be in her car, and I'm just going to call her and I'm just going to see. And she answered the phone in the car, and I got lucky. And I was like, I'm sorry to bother you. Like, I was watching your broadcast, great stuff. And I'm a friend of Jackie's. And she's like, and she was so friendly. And she was sorry that she didn't even get back to my email, but she was so lovely. And she said, would you want to come in sometime? And I said, I'd love to buy you coffee. I don't want to be in the way. So I went and met her one day for a coffee, and she had her cards close to her chest. Like, she wasn't revealing much about the job or about, like, life. And by the end of the chat, she started to loosen up. She's like, all right, next week, come in and I'll show you around. So that led to me breaking in the door, thanks to Jackie. And I'm just so grateful for that moment, because the breakthrough is always the hardest part. But now with LinkedIn, LinkedIn and ways to connect with people on social media, whenever someone young who's an aspiring broadcaster or just somebody in the broadcast world reaches out to me on LinkedIn, I'll always write back, and I'll always try and help in any way possible, because people did it for me.
And that's how we got in contact. I reached out to you, I think it was in May. I came across your name and I was like, because I love covering, I was saying to you before we recorded, covering athletes abroad, and I was like, geez, there's an Irish man, hosted on Apple TV. Like, I don't have Apple TV, unless you can hook me up. But but it's, and I think that's the power of, particularly I find with Irish people abroad, we're so good, I have to say, for helping people, whether in Ireland actually and abroad. If especially when you're young, there's, like, I know you're helping out a friend of mine at the moment. Like, I think Irish people are great.
Oisín, he's a good
shout
lad.
out to Oisín, he'll be delighted with that now. But there is a thing there, particularly I find with the Irish, when you go abroad and you're trying to make something out of an opportunity. Whenever someone Irish is around, they will try and help you and give you that stepping stone.
But I do think, though, there's lessons to this too. Like, I got a DM on LinkedIn yesterday. Hope the person is not listening to this, but he basically said, you're connected with Atlanta in the World Cup. Can you get me cheaper tickets than what's advertised? There was no please, there was no thank you. And, like, that's an extreme example. I read it and I'm like, the cheek, like the absolute, as we'd say in Ireland, the gall of someone to do that. But then there's ways to do it where, when you reach out and you're genuinely polite and you're genuinely curious and you love the industry and that comes across well, and you ask in the right way, anybody will help. You'd like to think anybody, but, like, majority of people, especially Irish, we want to see Irish succeed. But I've had other Irish people reach out and they just don't do it the right way. And you don't want to help them as much, because clearly, if I help, say, someone with connections or whatever else, I want to know that they're going to represent me well. Like, if I'm going to go out of my way to help someone, I want to know that when they're given that opportunity, that they're going to go in and give it all they've got and be respectful. Don't be the loudest person in the room, like we talked about. Be a sponge and excel eventually.
So you're saying there's a chance I'll get cheaper tickets now to Atlanta, then I know you.
At least you've said please and thank you, right?
Is that I always love asking as well. Like, I ask for advice. I always like asking about mistakes. I think you learn a lot from mistakes.
Yeah.
What's the biggest mistake you see young broadcasters do early in their career?
I think so. Can I tell you a quick story? This is one that I'll never ever forget. And if Darren Frehel is listening to this, he'll remember it well, because I was 21 maybe, and I was given a chance to do. I'd started doing radio bulletins, on 2FM and on Radio 1, and it was my first day on RT Radio 1 and the news at 1 doing the sports. So you land in, and it was a guy called Sean O'Rourke. I don't know if he's still doing it. Was at the round table. Oftentimes there'd be politicians sitting there, and you've got your sports bulletin from the radio centre. You've ran across, because that news at 1 was in the TV building. Again, could be totally different right now, or could be the exact same for all I know. And I nailed it, and it went well. I say I nailed it, like I thought it was just fine, but apparently Sean O'Rourke said to Declan McBennett, the boss at the time, get him back on again tomorrow, maybe. And Declan said, you're on again tomorrow. So I was feeling confident. I was buzzing. My granny was listening in Cabra. My dad was listening at work. And I went and I prepared all the different sports stories on separate lines nearly in the iNews. This is media talk for people that like it basically on the computer. And I printed them all out. And as I'm walking across campus, thinking I'm this big shot that's going to do the news at One Sport, um, I get close to the building and I realize, oh no, I'm after leaving out the golf story. So there was the GAA story that was leading, then there was a football story. I still remember those stories. This was a traumatic moment for me, genuinely, Orla. I still remember the first story, which I'll get to in a second. The second story was about Carlos Tevez and Javier Mascherano, and they were at West Ham at the time. Um, there was something about John O'Shea, but there was like 5 or 6 different sports, but I forgot the golf. And there was a young golfer from Ireland at the time that was performing really well. It was the Bridgestone Invitational in Ohio. So I had option one was, or option A was to just leave out the golf. And I'm like, if I leave out the golf, someone's going to notice that I didn't put in the golf and I'm going to get in trouble. Option B was to run back. And I was fit at the time. And I was like, just leg it back, add the golf, print it out, run back over. So option A, option B, what do? I decided to run. So I sprinted back through past the canteen, over to the radio center. The printer's out of paper. I'm starting to panic a little bit, right? So eventually I log in, I figure this out, I get it printed, someone helped me out, and I start sprinting back across. I run upstairs. Bernadette was the producer. Again, the little things you remember from these traumatic moments. Bernadette says, Kevin, quickly, he's waiting for you. So I open the door and Orla, I'm I'm panicking. And at this moment, I'm really nervous because I was nervous anyway. And now you add the fact that like I can't catch my breath. And a bunch of politicians sitting there. It was big. Sean O'Rourke says, as I'm walking in, he says, and Kevin Egan's arriving here with the sport. Kevin, welcome. Come on in. Hey, Sean, we're going to start with Gaelic games. And I'm panicking. At this point, I want the world to swallow me up, right? So I go, Kerry centre back Aidan O'Mahony has failed a drugs test. The substance salbutamol was found in his system. And Sean O'Rourke jokes, well, it sounds like you could use some salbutamol yourself. And this is an inhaler, right? This is something that you use, like an inhaler for player that he was wrongly accused of something. I forget the exact story, but I couldn't catch my breath and I was nervous. And I was, 21. I thought I'm doomed. This is it. Like I'm screwed now, you know? I didn't even move on to the football. I finished the GAA story. I was so embarrassed. And I went, that's off the sports desk. It was awful. So I didn't even get to the story of the golf. And it just so happened that this young Irish golfer was a little guy, I think he was 16 at the time, named Rory McIlroy, right? So Rory McIlroy was the golfer. And I left that room and I got a text off Darren. And he was the first person to reach out to me. Please forward this to Darren if you can, because this is one of those moments where I'll forever be thankful that he just wrote back, everything's going to be okay. It happens to all of us. And it was such a lovely message to receive because in that moment I thought, you're fired. You've disgraced your family. My dad called me. What happened? Like in that moment, like he probably just wanted to know versus because it went well the day before and I couldn't have been that nervous. And I think when it comes back to this being a mistake, for example, the reason it was a mistake is in that moment I was young and I was green and I was naive, right? I was very immature in that world. Now, if that happened to me, for example, if the exact same thing happened to me, I just simply say, and I know we've phones these days and it makes it easier, but I would have walked up as calm as ever to Bernadette, sitting there, the producer, and said, Bernadette, do me a solid, would you? Any chance at all you could just pull up PGA.com. What's Rory McIlroy at? And she'd say, he's at -1 through 16. And I'd be like, perfect. Thank you. And I'd go on and I'd do my 6, 7 sports stories and I'd add at the end. And by the way, keep an eye out for young Irish golfer Rory McIlroy, who's having a tremendous round today at the Bridgestone Invitational in Ohio, currently 1 under after 16 or whatever. And I didn't know to do that. That was never an option. And sometimes I think in life and in broadcasting, certainly, there's option A, there's option B, but sometimes there's a dirt road over the top of the hill that'll get you there a little bit quicker and it'll make a lot more sense. And yeah, that's probably one of those lessons I learned along the way. It's just to take a moment, figure out, okay, is this the right thing to do? How could I get to where I want to go quicker? Yeah, actually, there's a better option.
I'm going to tell Darren, and I'll also, if I get a chance on Saturday at the Sport Awards where Rory McIlroy is nominated, I might let him know. I'll say I was chatting to Kev Egan, and he'd be like, "Who?" He'd be,
He won't
he'd
know
be
me,
like,
I'm
"Who are
sure,
you?" And I'd
but
be like,
yeah, it's
"Just take a photo, will you?" But that's, and do you know what? That's what happens, and that's, the more that I learn about the industry as well. You make mistakes, and it's just about how you react to it and how you bounce back. And no matter who you are, you make a mistake. I'll never forget in our induction, actually, a guy, he was working on prime time. He said, we were talking about how you managed the earpiece in as a presenter, and he was like, someone said a word that made, like, I can't remember the word, but it literally had like zero, like no relevance at all to their conversation, and he just in the middle of the show blurted out, like, whatever his line was off the auto cue, he blurted out whatever word the producer said because that was in his ear, and he was like, that you just learn from those mistakes, and like, you're human, and if you acknowledge it, I find half the time if you acknowledge the mistake on air, you'll actually gain the respect of the listener rather than trying to say, I didn't make a mistake and try to cover it up, because then we all know that there's a respect there. If you hold your hand up and say, oh geez, sorry, I misnamed Messi for someone else by accident, they'll kind of respect that.
no, you're going to make a mistake, and be like Robbie Keane, for example. Be a good striker, be a goldfish. Forget about it. Like, move on to the next chance. And that's why, honestly, I don't like auto cue. I don't use it. If there's something that I absolutely need to use it for example, like let's say you're on RT and it's a competition, for example, or if it's something that the exact verbiage is needed and required, and you're in the moment and you're on camera, that's different. But if it's something leading to break, or if it's something to set up a conversation, no chance. Because I think it takes away from the natural conversation, the natural feel about a show.
Good point. Is there anything that we do in Ireland, whether it's in training and media, or maybe just culturally in society, that sets us apart a little bit in the international side of things?
I think in Ireland we cover analysis really, really well. And that's something that I wish we did more of where I work now at Apple and MLS. They, like, I remember sitting next to John Giles as the shot lister, for example, and making sure that he felt really good about all the different moments in the match that I've selected for him, or he's told me about. I remember one piece of analysis on Cesc Fabregas, and like being just in awe of his vision for the game, John, and understanding the moments, and then seeing it play out. And one thing we do on Irish TV that we don't do over here enough is give enough time for that analysis. Like, there's plenty of time allotted to breaking down a game and really diving deep into the match and understanding the ebbs and flows and why certain moments were so critical. And at times I think we don't give the analysis that much energy and that much time, where I massively respect that from Irish TV.
What do you think for budding, broadcasters, particularly hosts? And we were speaking about it before we recorded. It's a very subjective industry at times, where the decision maker can love you or not love you, and that's the reality of it. How did you deal with that, trying to get on air and being the host, and now that you are?
Well, I think you can't, like, the old phrase of like comparison is the thief of joy, for example, is so true. Stop comparing what other people are getting to what you're getting, and what with the opportunities that others are maybe, because ultimately, if you start saying, well, I'm doing all this and I'm not getting the chances they're getting, you're not doing yourself any favors. Like, in terms of progressing forward, focus on what you do really well and how you can be the best you, because no one's going to be better at being you than yourself, right? So say to yourself, okay, if they're getting this because of this, what are they really good at? And then what can I be better at in certain areas? If you want to compare, that's what you do. Do it to benefit yourself. And I think just lean into what you're good at. I know now, I'm 40 now. So I've got, like, I've got a lot of time in the industry since 2004. So what, 21 years, 21 and a half years in the industry now. And I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm not good at. And there's certain types of shows, for example, that I just don't feel are a great fit for my personality and what I'm doing. What I'm doing now with Apple and MLS, I feel so at home with it. It's something that I feel like I'm thriving in, and I feel like I can get better at. Of course, we can always improve, but understanding what you're good at, and that takes time, because, for example, reading the news, like, that was never me. You know, even back in RT when I was doing that, I found myself like I feel like I've got more energy to jump into something else versus reading a piece of paper. And there's certain people that are just great at it. And that's one very small example. Like I've done different jobs throughout my career where I've thought, no, this isn't the right fit for me. Whereas I think what I'm doing now just seems to work. And eventually, if you keep going in the industry, you'll find that job that you absolutely love, and then it's about protecting it. Then it's about like doing the best you can to get the best out of your analyst, to be the best teammate, to do what your bosses want you to do, and then thrive on air and make sure that the audience aren't too pissed off by what you're saying and doing on a daily basis.
What do you think, from your experience, what do editors or producers value the most in a host?
I think that's such a good question, and I don't think it's asked enough. I think a bond, first of all, a good relationship where you can be back and forth. Like my wife will laugh because our producer Pedro over here, Pedro and I, he'll call me at the most random times right before dinner, and she's like, "Do you guys not arrange meetings to talk through everything?" You know, and I'm like, "No, we just communicate all week long. So we're friends, but we're not best pals meeting up to go for drinks together or anything. We're just really in sync when it comes to what the show needs to be the best it can possibly be. And so we talk all the time about that. And we clash over certain things and we agree on certain things. And that relationship is really important. But I think ultimately, when you then go on air, that relationship needs to be locked tight because you could have analysts that could go off on a tangent and he's got times to keep. So he's in my ear going, come on, rein him in. And that's when I need to be the one to like, when they're on a single shot, I'm like, like, come on, bring it down, finish your point, let's get out of here. And for me, keeping the show on the track, like I mentioned, is really, really important for him, for his job, for the overall show and the flow, because they put so much more thought into the producers do into what's what's in the show, how the show's structured, the timings of the show, and then it's up to the host to be respectful of that and make sure to keep the show on time, make sure the analysts are good, and make sure you've got a great relationship, honestly, because that percolates throughout an entire network. When the producer and the host are in sync and they're not clashing, if the producer and the host are clashing all the time, everyone feeds off that energy. And I've been in those situations before where I've witnessed it. And in the control room, people are uncomfortable. On the desk, the analysts are uncomfortable. It's just not set up for success.
I love watching. Well, it's kind of ruined it for me in a sense. I can never watch sports on TV properly now because even with the replays, I'm like, I know exactly what's going on behind the scenes. And even in studio, when you're watching, as you say, the camera, the audience see the analyst, but it's it's the indicators from the host or from the other analyst that want to jump in, and it's all the moving parts that people don't see. Like there is a science to it. Yeah. How much of the industry is talent versus relationship building and getting to know people? We spoke about it before. Sometimes it's just about someone seeing your face that you haven't seen for a while and they say, Jesus, I actually have a job for him or her.
I think luck obviously plays a massive role, but you need to know when you're getting a bit of luck. Some people don't realize it. Some people, luck could smack them in the face and they won't realize it, and they certainly won't capitalize on it. So you get your element of luck along the way if you try hard enough. But I think the hard work beats talent every single day of the week. Like it's not even a question. The amount of talented people that you meet that are not in the industry for long, and a part of that becomes and is because you just don't see longevity. Like I meet people and I think, okay, there's real longevity in that person because they're humble. They understand that the greater good is more important than their own interests. They work hard for the team. It's a lot of those world class basics that we touched on: being a good person, loving what you do, loving the fact that the greater good should benefit over yourself. And that's what a good host will do anyway. A good host cannot make it about themselves. Um, and I think, yeah, like hard work, like making sure you know your subject, making sure that on air you're doing the things you're supposed to do, getting the best out of the analysts, and then working even harder to make the show better the following week. Like hard work is everything, because when you're working as hard as you possibly can, if you're looking for a breakthrough and you're producing the right content and you're studying the league, if you're studying something inside and out, maybe you do a piece of content, for example, on the 5 most interesting things that you felt happened over the weekend, and then you become a better storyteller. And I think storytelling, I think about it often with raising my kids, James and Maisie, that if I could give them one gift, and it's not that I have it, I feel like I'm learning every single day. But if I was magic, say for example, and I could wave a magic wand and give them one gift, it would be beyond health, obviously. It would be storytelling. because we're in the age of AI arriving in. It's going to take a lot of jobs and it's going to have a monumental impact on our industry. But to go on TV or to go on radio and to be a storyteller, even in print, is something that I don't think they can take away from us. And AI will be very good at it. But storytelling on air and selling emotion and selling a game in the right way is something that I think we will keep with us, and something that I think is going to grow in value over time, because so much of AI will take away so much. But for the person to be on screen and be a good storyteller and captivate and capture, I think it's going to be really important.
Yeah, I love that. And we're seeing already the importance of live sport. It's the top 10 shows, I think, on Irish TV. It's public information. I think 8 of the 10 are live sport. Actually, could be 9. And then the toy show is probably number 7 out of 10. Like
And
the All
that's
Ireland.
essentially live.
And
That's live
yeah,
too.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's actually a really good point. It's probably the closest thing to an All Ireland hurling final. It's just the
Yeah.
chaos of all the
Yeah.
cars going and all the kids. What would you do different? Like, it's hard to ask you that question now, seeing as you've in terms of in the industry you've made it. But what would you do differently in your journey?
I don't think made it's like I'm just so grateful for the journey. I'm grateful, honestly. I know this sounds cheesy, but I'm grateful every single day when I go for a run that my legs are moving. Like, I think if you lead with gratitude and understand what you have, and how you can improve and get better at all times, it will keep you grounded and humble, and understanding that the road you've had has been a blessed one, say, and the one ahead hopefully will be too. I wouldn't change a single thing, because everything's, the failures, man. So there were some really hard falls over the last, say, 17 years since I came here, or even before, and I wouldn't change a single thing, because I'm conditioned by that. I said recently, we were in a car at MLS Cup in Miami, and we were all in a car going somewhere, and someone talked about the lotto. And I said, I'd hate to win the lotto. And they all laughed at me, and they're like, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "No, genuinely, I don't have an interest in playing the lotto, because I don't want to win the lotto, because it would change everything about the mindset of how you approach life. It would change my kids' mindset and on hunger and drive and ambition and passion and going after things. It would alter everything you do, whether you like it or not. And I love the fact that I wake up hungry and driven every single day and eager to impress and to try and go from strength to strength in my career and as a husband and as a father, and to work hard for flights home for Christmas for Ireland, for example, and not just have the ability to call a private jet, even though that would be absolutely lovely. There's something satisfying about working hard and seeing the rewards come in, and doing it yourself versus it being handed to you.
It would be remiss of me not to ask about Ireland and the World Cup. It's currently December 25. I think this will probably go out in February. So the dream is still very much alive. Now, how strong that dream is will depend on how the weeks go by. What are our chances? And I tweeted, I don't think they were Irish. They said, for the betterment of the World Cup, it would be better if Ireland were in it. I think from a fan perspective, we were always a bit nuts in terms of being fans. But what's our chances? What are your thoughts on it?
I think our chances are high, but I'm an optimist. The lads, I'm on a group chat with all the lads in school from Fintan's, and they're like, quit it with the American optimism. And this is with 3 games to go. And I was like, no, I can see us pulling this off. Here's what needs to happen. And I didn't think we'd need to win all 3 games. I didn't think it would come to that, because I felt that Hungary would slip up elsewhere. But I was just so impressed by the resolve from this team. Again, we talk about getting a little bit of luck, but capitalizing on that luck, they absolutely did that. And now I think Parrott's confidence will be high. Great to see Evan Ferguson scoring, albeit against Wilfred Nancy's Celtics. I want to see Nancy do well at Celtic. And hopefully he'll start scoring goals, and we figure out a way to play both of them up front. But I love the back five. I think they'll give you absolutely everything. Caoimhín Kelleher is a gift to Ireland right now. We're very lucky to have him. And in midfield, keep it solid. And we have a chance. And here's the thing. Where do I live, Orla? Where do I live? I live in Atlanta. So if Ireland make it, and when Ireland make it, the second game in the group is in Atlanta, Georgia. And my wife and I haven't even announced this yet, but I'm telling you, this is not going out until February, so it'll be public by then. But we're going to be co-owners of a new bar and restaurant, which is going to be the closest bar to Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and it's called the Irish Exit. So our Irish pub will be absolutely out the door busy. It's a contemporary, a modern twist on Ireland, working with the group called the Dead Rabbit up in New York, and it's very much traditional based, but a look toward tomorrow, and it's a nod to the successful, ambitious, modern Ireland that we see today. So I hope that the Irish exit is fully open, and I hope that Ireland are there, and I hope that many people enjoy a great pint of Guinness before heading into the stadium to see us beat South Africa in what will be, by the way, a dome, beautifully air conditioned, so no need to worry about the heat.
I love it. Oh, you've given me an exclusive and everything now
Yeah,
for it.
there you
So
go.
there you go. So when I get my tickets, I'll be in that bar after as well.
Yes, you will. Yes, you will. A pint of Guinness on me.
Yeah, deadly. I would love to know actually, in terms of the American sports approach, like tailgating just seems perfect for Jones's Road, pre All Ireland football
Yeah.
final or hurling final. Like, is there anything we could take from the American culture? I know Michael Darragh Macaulay spoke before about the kind of pre-game entrances. I'm sure GA managers would shudder at the thought of people wearing different clothes and not the team uniform. What would you love to see in Ireland from an American culture perspective?
Well, I think the Americans lean into entertainment far more than Irish. And I would love, like, this is, there's certain aspects to, at MLS Cup, for example, we had a ref cam. Okay. So the referee had a camera on his, I think it was on his ear. So all of a sudden, we're getting the greatest access to Lionel Messi that we've ever seen. Okay. And it's gone viral. And it's Messi speaking English to the referee, saying, "No foul. Why? Why?" And he's in the referee's face. And this stuff, obviously, it's not going out live. I don't think there was a ref cam option live, because what if the players say something and then it's a big, huge issue? I think it's something that MLS put out after the fact. And here's the greatest clips from ref cam. That's the sort of innovation that I think we always need to look for within the game. Now, there's certain other innovations, like, for example, at the World Cup, no matter what the temperature is, there'll be first and second half hydration breaks. So in a stadium like Atlanta's, which is a dome, and Dallas, you don't need that. But this is simply for commercial regions, which I absolutely hate. So there's ones that we need to lean into, and there's others that we need to say no to. But I think in Ireland, yeah, like I love, love, love Ireland. I love everything about the traditions we have. And maybe there's always ways to add or subtract. And I think maybe, a halftime in an All Ireland, I'm not saying a Super Bowl-esque show, but who doesn't love a bit of music, a bit of live music, that sort of thing where, or the entertaining shows, like there's some great entertaining shows on Irish TV. So I don't know, America with the entertainment and the innovation is something that I admire. But I also think we do in Ireland as well. Like, we've always evolved. And when I was working in RTE, there were always new ways to evolve and innovate and take a broadcast forward. So I'm not really one to say, because I am living away, and I've got too much respect for Ireland and my country.
Yeah, that's a good point. But I would agree with you in terms of the All Ireland football and hurling finals. I really think, like, there was a rumour going around that Kingfisher were going to do halftime in the All Ireland hurling final because of Cork, and they didn't in the end. But I thought that was,
And then the Amble fans would be raging.
yeah, exactly. I do want to ask as well, what do you know for sure about what you do?
I know I love it. I know it's not promised. So I've got to work harder than ever, that it could be taken at any single moment. The rights could go, the bosses could decide you're not the face for this anymore. We don't want to see you when we go on the air. Nothing is given. So work hard. And what do I know about it? I know it makes me happy. I know it makes me really, really happy.
Amazing. That's a great answer. I'm going to wrap up with the sideline 7. It's the same 7 questions at the end of every episode. I don't actually know if I sent it to you, and apologies in advance if I haven't. It's been a mad week
That's okay.
between Amble and all this crack. Question 1, Kevin, what's your favourite quote?
These are the good old days. Because I think no matter, and obviously it's not for everybody, and there are moments of real hardship, but for the average situation, when you embrace the current moment that you're in, and you reflect on it positively, and the opportunity that you have and the love that you have in your life. I look at my life now, and I'm so appreciative for my kids, for my wife, my parents, are alive and well. I can't wait to see them next week. Like, for me, these are the good old days. So I'm going to look back at this moment in my life with a massive smile and love for this present moment. But I hope that in 20 years' time, I'll also be looking around saying these are the good old days. So I really like that perspective.
I love that. Question 2, the best sporting event you've been to. Pick one as a fan and one you've worked at.
Oh, yeah, I love this. Okay, so I'm going to pick the 2011 All-Ireland final, hands down, as a fan. Cluxton's kick sailing through the post. My brother Michael and I had the most perfect view from where we were. And as soon as it left his foot, we were just started bawling, crying, because we knew that the game was almost over. if we could just hold out for another 30 or seconds or so, we were all Ireland champions. So that's number one. And the best one I've experienced working, the Classicos were so impressive. Hearing like Placido Domingo like sing the opera as Messi and Ronaldo and these guys come out to the field and I'm sideline. I felt such huge responsibility because these games were so widely viewed around the world and in North America that there was enormous pressure, but a love for what it was. But I think given, yeah, like there's been moments like that. WrestleMania hosted, which goes out to tens of millions of people, but I didn't have the love for that I have for what I'm doing now. So given working on it, I worked on All Ireland finals at home, but I was in the TV truck, so it's not the same for what I do compared to what I do now. I would say this past Saturday, I'm just going to give you a recent one. Miami won MLS Cup. We had David Beckham join us on the desk. Lionel Messi win an MVP after the game. Just a tremendous day, a tremendous weekend. Miami and Vancouver fans brought it. Miami have a new stadium opening up. But just to see the trajectory of Major League Soccer and where it's going with people like Beckham, you know, and the Maas brothers and the cast of ownership around the league, I'm just really bullish on where the league is going. So to be hosting that for our global coverage on Apple TV was just a huge honor.
Yeah, amazing. I think MLS is only going to explode, and particularly like the likes of Beckham and Messi and what they've done for the league. You know, it's just going to go to new trajectories. What if you actually, bonus question, what would you love to have work at that you haven't done yet? What's on the bucket list?
Oh man, probably like a World Cup final. You know, probably a World Cup final. Probably like honestly, an All Ireland final. Would be something that would mean so much to me. And like, it's one of those things in life you never say never, because life just moves quickly and you've got to pivot and be versatile. But I love where I live. We're not moving anytime soon. But being back working in Ireland again, like I just have a huge level of graw and love for Irish TV, for Irish culture, and being home. You know, I can't wait to go home at Christmas. So it's just that's probably one, yeah, because I left so young.
Fair. Question 3, the biggest setback or challenge so far in your career, and how did you react to it?
Biggest setback or challenge in my career, and how did I react to it? I would say challenge was probably getting in the door over here, but I'd say when I parted ways with WWE, right? Because I wasn't their long-term guy and they weren't my long-term company. So this was never a match made in heaven. Like I worked hard for 3 years, I gave it everything. But I think afterwards, you know, the way I left and like the public nature of that role and the amount of people that knew or calling me or contacting me, I think it was one of those ones that maybe the real Irish person in me was like, oh Jesus Christ, like there was just I wanted that time to move on quicker. So how did I react to it? I got back to work, and you know, I love the job I'm in now, and that's the job I was starting down around that time. So it helped, but adjusting from such a weird schedule for 3 years when I was just gone so much, adjusting to a lesson schedule, but being around the family much more and being busy in a different way, I think was probably a challenge. And I hope I'm communicating this well. Like being home with the kids is the best thing ever, but it was just a definite challenge leaving that role and the way I left, and then doing what I'm doing now. I suppose it's just a blessing.
On the flip side, your biggest achievement in or outside of sport?
I think it's that I'm really happy. I think it's that I'm happy, and I think that I have a lot of people that I love in my life. It's unquestionably my biggest achievement. Being a dad is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me, bar none. It's not even close. I married a lady who like is ridiculous how like brilliant she is, and she's just such a good person, a great person who has an infectious love for life as well. And I see our two kids, and I'm just so proud, and I have a great relationship with my siblings, my parents. So being happy and being loved and being able to love other people. I know it sounds a bit cheesy, but that's by far and away the greatest achievement.
Amazing. Question 5, advice to your 18-year-old self.
Oh, I've often thought about this because I'd love to sit at a bar and have a Guinness with, you know, I'm 40 now, let's say an 18-year-old me, and let's say a 70-year-old me. All right. I'd love to be able, and for us not to be able to talk about the journey, but just maybe give a little bit of advice, or at least for the 70-year-old to look down and go, you're doing well. Like, keep doing what you're doing, or just enjoy the journey. I think that would probably be the biggest piece of advice, is just, you know instinctually what the right things to do are. So follow your gut, be good to people, and enjoy the journey, because it's going to have plenty of bumps and bruises along the way, but everything's for a reason in that sense. You're going to come through and hopefully continue to spread a bit of positivity and enjoy the journey as well. So that's probably it. I'd need to think of a shorter way to say that, but enjoy the journey, because it's unpredictable.
Your answer there is probably, you haven't answered what's going to be my next question, which is your dream dinner guest and why. And I love that answer of your 18-year-old self, your current self, and your 70-year-old self. That would be, obviously, if you could do it, that would be amazing. But who would be your dream dinner guest, Kevin?
Dream dinner. One guest?
Make it a dinner party. Everyone typically does. They cheat.
Dead or alive?
Go for it, wherever you want, because it probably won't happen anyway.
Yeah, I know. I think maybe my best friend in the world passed away when we were about 25. So that would be one where I'd have Andy back, and or my grandfather's. I would say dream dinner guest. Again, this sounds a bit cheesy, but I don't take for granted the journey, say, my dad had in his career and in life. And like, any chance I get to just sit one-on-one and have a Guinness or a bite to eat with my dad, I just love it. Like, I love those moments. And exact same with my mom, who moved from Chicago to Ireland, and life wasn't easy adjusting to Ireland in the 80s. And as an American, so they've just got such tremendous stories to tell. But if I was to pick one that's probably a little bit more interesting for your listeners, I think Matthew McConaughey. I think he's got a tremendous perspective on life. He's now in the MLS world as owner of Austin. So I'd love a drink or a chat or a bite to eat with Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah, he's come up a couple of times, actually. He's an interesting character. Final question before I let you go. If your life was a book...
Or Barack Obama, actually. Barack Obama would be...
Oh, yeah. That would be... Yeah. And actually, Michelle has a great podcast. I don't know if you've listened to it.
Yes.
It's excellent. Yes. Maybe...
Yeah, she's brilliant. So Michelle and Barack as a team would probably be my number one pick, actually.
Brilliant. If your life was a book, which someday it might be, what chapter would this be called?
I think something along the lines of realizing happiness. Like, I'm very comfortable within my own skin now. I don't need to impress anyone. I feel like I don't need to worry about the opinions of others. I'm 40. I think at 30, my perspective was a lot different. At 20, it was a hell of a lot different than it is now. Even throughout my 30s, I think about where I was when I was 30. I got married. 2 weeks later, we had to move from Chicago to Miami. We had to meet a whole bunch of new friends, a brand new job. When we had to move, we briefly moved to North Carolina, then on to Atlanta. We've lived in 7 different addresses. We had 7 different addresses in 7 years at one point. And now we have a home that we love. Our kids are happy. And I think it's just the feeling of being very comfortable with where we're at right now and loving where we're at right now in life. So I would say it's probably going to be called, if this makes any sense, like Discovering Happiness.
I love it. That's a great answer.
Or What Happiness Truly Is. What happiness truly is.
I love that. That's an amazing answer. And that's, I think, the perfect way to wrap the episode. Kevin, it's been an absolute pleasure. I loved hearing all about your journey and your insights. And I look forward to catching up over a pint in the Irish Exit in Atlanta.
Love that. And can I just say, by the way, you ask the best questions of any show I've ever been on.
Thank you.
So, and I don't say that lightly. I mean it. Your questions are phenomenal, and you're a great interviewer, and I loved every second of this. So thanks, Orla.
Sorry, Kevin, that is such a compliment. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.